Hello and welcome to The Nexus. Today we're looking at the slave trade that supports the chocolate industry. According to some experts, 100%, not 10, not 50%, but 100% of the chocolate we eat can be traced back to cocoa farms that use child labor. They estimate that there are something like 1.6 million child laborers working in the cocoa farms of West Africa, and as many as half of them are slaves. Not modern-day slavery, not some kind of soft slavery, but actual slavery. Now, young children are abducted from poor countries like Mali and Burkina Faso and taken to neighboring countries like Ivory Coast and Ghana to work for farmers who own them, work them and beat them until they submit totally. The cocoa is sold to massive conglomerates which supply household names like Nestle and Cadburys. So you can bet that if you've eaten chocolate recently, it's probably tainted. All the ads for chocolate tell us it's seductive, irresistible, glamorous, and even amorous. Whatever the occasion, Mother's Day, Father's Day, work, rest, and play, chocolate's what you need, and the ads pay off. Every year, nearly 80 billion bars of chocolate are sold around the world. That's 10 bars for every person on the planet. But behind the smiles and shiny wrappers, there's a dark story the advertisers don't want you to know. It's the story of how the cocoa industry runs on the blood, sweat and tears of child slaves. The US Labor Department estimates that over 2 million children work in the cocoa industry globally. Most of this horror takes place in West Africa. Ghana and the Ivory Coast together produce 60% of the world's cocoa. The cocoa plantations here are full of children, often taken from poorer neighboring countries, especially Mali and Burkina Faso. The children are promised jobs, rounded up and taken across the border. It's estimated that 1.56 million children are working in West African cocoa farms, and around 4 out of 10 of them are slaves. No pay, no chance of escaping, and harsh conditions, including malnourishment and physical and mental torture. They're at the bottom of the cocoa pyramid. The cocoa they harvest is sold by the farmers to a local cooperative, which then sells it to big conglomerates from around the world, including America's Cargill and Mondelez and Switzerland's Barry Callebaut, which in turn supply cocoa to household names like Nestle, Mars, Cadburys and Lindt. Human rights groups say these companies know about the child labor and are therefore responsible and ought to pay laborers and former laborers compensation. But America's Supreme Court disagrees. It recently ruled that Nestle and its cocoa supplier Cargill cannot be sued for benefiting from child slavery in Ghana and the Ivory Coast because the crime is being perpetrated by foreign citizens in a foreign land, over which it has no jurisdiction. Okay, let's bring in our guest now. And top left there, we have Terry Collingsworth. He is the US lawyer who represented former child slaves in that court case against big US chocolate firms. We're also going to hear from Aidan McQuaid, an independent human rights consultant who's trying to help Mondelez International become more ethical in its cocoa acquisitions. We have 2 cocoa farmers also from Ghana, Nana Aduna. He believes there's no such child slavery problems in his country, and Nelson Donkor says there very much is. Hello and welcome to the program, everyone. Terry, I'd like to start with you. So it was your court case that made the headlines last month. Here's the BBC, for example. US Supreme Court blocks child slavery lawsuit against chocolate firms. Terry, what was your case?
We, in that case, represent 6 children who were trafficked from Mali to Cote d'Ivoire when they were very young, 12, 13 years old. And each of them, for a period of years, were forced to work as slaves to harvest cocoa for some of the largest cocoa companies in the world. I do need to add that the Supreme Court blocked the current complaint as written. They announced a new standard, and we will be amending the complaint, so the case is far, far from over.
Right. And what kinds of accounts from these 6 people did you present in your case?
Even the very conservative Supreme Court justices that we faced were moved by the stories of my clients. They were lied to in Mali at a bus station. They were told that they would be getting a good job in Cote d'Ivoire harvesting cocoa, that they would be paid, and they would be well taken care of. When they were then taken to Cote d'Ivoire and they arrived at the plantations, they found out the truth that they were now slaves. They were not going to be paid. They were going to be fed barely enough to stay alive. And if they tried to escape or failed to work, they were severely beaten. One of my clients, John Doe 3, tried to escape, and he was caught and had the bottoms of his feet slashed with a machete, and pepper was rubbed into the wounds. All of my clients have scars from being beaten. They were truly slaves. We don't need to use new terms like modern slavery or anything like that to leaven the fact that this was actually slavery that were enduring.
And over which period of time were they slaves?
These children were slaves from about 1998 to 2003 or 4, depending on the child. So this case is old. I mean, we filed it in 2005 and have been fighting in the appellate courts ever since. But yes, they took several years before they managed to escape their horrific conditions.
And just remind us which companies you were going up against, and please explain how you were trying to draw the connection between them and these big household names.
The two companies that are at issue in this first case are Cargill and Nestle. Our information tracing their supply chains was that they were the recipients of the cocoa in the plantations where our clients worked. And we now have confirmed that much more easily in modern times, and it's a lot easier to trace the actual cocoa.
The case isn't over, as you said, but it has been argued that this is an overseas territory and it's got nothing to do with US jurisdiction. Is that basically why it has hit a brick wall so far?
Yes, we have a very difficult test to meet for extraterritorial jurisdiction in that particular statute that we use, the Alien Tort Statute. And so the companies never have done what we've said about what's going on the plantations. Instead, they've argued that they can't be sued in the United States for what we say they did in Cote d'Ivoire. I do have to quickly add that we filed a second case just a few months ago under a relatively new statute called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act that is expressly extraterritorial. We represent 8 different children who have sued Nestle, Cargill, Mondelez, Barry Callebaut, Mars, Hershey, and Olaf. And that case is going to move a lot faster because of this new statute.
These companies have billions of dollars. This looks very much like a David and Goliath situation. Is that right? It's very asymmetrical?
Yes, of course. They've hired the biggest law firms in the world. They have an incentive to delay. Their lawyers get paid by the hour. It's a typical situation of going against a huge, powerful company and all of the lawyers that money can buy. But we have truth, justice, and determination on our side, and we're trying to end slavery in the year 2021. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's true that we're fighting to end slavery, and we're going to do it.
Aidan McQuaid, Terry Collingsworth mentioned Mondelez there, or Mondelez. You worked with them as a consultant to help improve the ethical standards in their cocoa acquisitions, and you're actually quite hopeful that they have been improving.
Well, I think particularly since the time whenever Terry was talking about when there was some major exposure of child slavery within cocoa supply chains, I think notably by a documentary called Chocolate Secret Slaves, I think there has been quite a shock to the system of the chocolate retailers, which has forced them to take on some of the issues around child labour and child slavery within their supply chains. I think it's important to be clear. Child slavery is the transfer of a child to a third party for the purposes of exploitation. So that's very much what Terry is describing there. But the bigger problem then is child labour, which is the children carrying out work which is not in their best interest, which is keeping them from school. And that often happens generally happens within their families. And that's much the bigger problem, though it's not necessarily the most egregious one. So one of the things that we've been seeing over time is a lot of companies beginning to engage with their supply chains in order to try and make sure that the communities that they're sourcing from have got a basic social floor of child protection and schools within them. Now, there's still an awful lot of work to be done in that not all companies are working with all of the communities. There's still a number of communities which are left out of the limb in that. And it's important to think for the businesses to recognize that this is an industry-wide problem which needs industry-wide solutions. Right. I think it also needs regional solutions because, as Terry described, his clients came from Mali, which isn't a cocoa-producing area, but a lot of the kids who have been trafficked into slavery, and particularly in Cote d'Ivoire, have been promised nice work and enough work to buy radios and bicycles if they go and work in Cote d'Ivoire for a couple of years, and that's what leads them into the situation of being trafficked. And part of the reason that they think it's a good idea is because the school system which they've been going to isn't very good, and there's not very good prospects in places like Mali or Burkina Faso. So this needs to be thought of in a regional way as well as in an industry-wide way.
Well, one of our guests, Nelson Donkor, knows what it's like to be a child labourer on his family's cocoa farm. Nelson, tell us about your time as a child labourer with your family and how you now campaign to stop children working and make sure they go to school.
Our late dad used us to do a whole lot of work at the farm, and because there was a marriage breakup between our mom, so whatever was going on in the village was, I would say now that it was child labor, because the kind of work that we were, our dad was using us to do, you can't imagine it, because it was I would say that because he used to say that his father or mother is not around, so we are lucky to have our dad with us. But it was very terrible, and I would say that we have been in a lot. That's why I decided that I would do everything possible to try my best to eradicate child slavery in our cocoa system in the country.
Thank you. Nana Aduna, your contention is that there is no such thing as child labour or child slave labour on cocoa farms in Ghana. How can you say that when we've just heard from experts and even one of your compatriots here that there is child labour and child slave labour in Ghana?
I think let's make a distinction from slavery, child work, child labor, and these are fairly easy distinctions to make. Unfortunately, the cocoa system that pertains right now is very much based on a colonial model. So let us make the distinction between unfair practices in terms of the whole system that is set up with respect to cocoa pricing, etc., which creates the problems that are associated with poor prices to farmers, etc. That's a very, it's a broader, larger issue. Now, with respect to the issue of the way the system works in Ghana on cocoa farms, and incidentally, let me again state very clearly that I can only speak about Ghana very clearly. And Ivory Coast have had their challenges, and some of the challenges and the period that is referred to was when they were having their civil conflict, which is a very different scenario from now. However, just coming back to Ghana, in the way that our system pertains, in Ghana, there are two traditional legal systems in which cocoa operates. There is what we call the Bunu system, which is a 50-50%, where the landowner and the what do they call it, and the farmer, the tenant farmer, actually share the proceeds. Okay, then there's a second system where there's a 1/3 to 1/3 system where the landowner provides everything and then the labor tenant farmer actually takes 1/3 of the proceeds. Now, let's be very, very clear here that it is almost impossible to actually, what do they call it, take somebody from across the border in Ghana and actually force them to work against their will on a cocoa farm when the system is such that the proceeds from the farm are shared. And in Ghana also, there's the Ghana Cocoa Board has a system where cocoa is purchased directly from those who are actually then doing the farming.
Nana, may I ask you a
yes,
direct question?
yes,
Thank you for your explanation so far.
yes,
Let me ask
yes,
you a direct question.
yes.
Are there child laborers working on cocoa farms in Ghana, yes or no?
No, they are not
Okay.
child laborers working on cocoa. There is child work, which is the family system, and in the way that my colleague from Ghana has actually described it, unfortunately, maybe his father or his parents.
What is the distinction? What is the distinction between child labor and child work?
I think that no one is forced against the will, and also incidentally, there are school systems. People go to school willingly. There are times when people off, whether during the weekends, etc., that happens in terms of going to school. Of course, the exceptions with respect to what my colleague is saying there, that parental abuse, etc. But that is not to say that.
Okay, we'll take that. 1 second. And is there child slave labor in Ghana? Slave labor?
No, and I'll say absolutely no. It is not true. Definitely not in Ghana. I'll say that with absolute confidence. No.
Terry Collingsworth, would you mind?
Can I just again explain something here? Look, Western people come from and do all kinds of research, ask all kinds of questions, which are not necessarily relevant to our sociocultural system. And let's be very, very clear here. I mean, in terms of the way, after all, how does a family or a child learn about a trade or a system when they are not exposed to it? Some very, very clear facts here. Look, the average age of the cocoa farmer in Ghana right now is 56 years. And one of the major reasons why is because cocoa farming and the price of cocoa is so low that you cannot actually attract the youth to go and do cocoa farming. So how do you...
Okay, let's pick up on that point. Terry, the reason why Nana is able to say with a straight face that there are no child slave laborers in Ghana is because he knows the area, it's his country, and people like you, Westerners, you rely on your outside perspective and make mistakes.
That is absolutely not true in the sense that I don't personally, I can't blend in very well and perform the research. I work with very, very good local individuals who go on the farms. Sometimes they take me, but they do the research. But I think the most important and most glaring indication that perhaps he hasn't toured his entire country is that the U.S. Department of Labor hired the University of Chicago to do a comprehensive survey of child labor in the cocoa sector in both Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. The results came out last October 2020, and they found that 1.56 million children are working in the industry, and 95% of those are performing work that the ILO Convention 182 has prohibited as the worst forms of child labor. 1.56 million, that's a lot of kids. I also want to add that in our own research, our own anecdotal field work, we have come across many children who we asked, where are they from? And they say, they're trained to say, I'm working for my uncle, I'm working for my father. But my researcher, who I work with in Cote d'Ivoire, for example, he knows the dialects and the sounds of the accents, and he almost always catches them lying and says, no, 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 you're from Burkina Faso, or you're from Mali, right? And the Department of Labor's study, finding the 1.56 million children, they did not, I don't know why, but they did not also look to see how many of those children were trafficked. They say that it's very difficult because of this problem that I've mentioned, that children are trained to lie. But that's a very important number, and I think we need to put more focus on that.
Nana, Nana, how are you not seeing this enormous problem right before your eyes?
Excuse me. Again, you're talking about Ghana, you're talking about Ivory Coast, you're talking about Burkina Faso. Please, again, why do you people pretend like Africa is one big lump place?
I don't think
Why?
he is. No, I'm sorry. We've invited...
I'm sorry.
I beg your pardon, Nana. We've invited Nelson Donkor on here. He lives in Ghana. He's from Ghana.
Yes.
He was a child labourer on his family's farm. He knows what he's talking about. Allow me to bring Nelson in, if I may. Nelson, we've heard from Nana. There are no child slaves on cocoa plantations in Ghana, and there are very few, if any, real child labourers.
Let me be honest. Let me be honest and sincere here. After I was speaking, I said I was once in the child slavery system. Myself and my siblings can testify to what I'm saying. And the system is now changing, right? The government is doing a lot about the child labor issue right now, right? So things are changing. And as Nana Aduna said, right? Nana is a community leader. I've heard about him, but I haven't met him personally before. The system now is, the government is putting a system in place to eradicate child labor. But I can say on authority that, because Nana, I am an assembly member, so I know what I'm talking about. I am an assembly member, so I know what I'm talking about. Even about 2 weeks ago, I saw a 14-year-old guy in the farm spraying weedicide. I have the video and the photos over there. So I went straight to the parents because I'm an assembly member. And when you come to my district, I am the municipal panel committee chair. So I know what I'm talking about. I have been sitting on issues like this several times. I work with the social welfare.
Well, unfortunately, we have lost Nelson, so we're going to go up to Aidan now. Aidan, who is the most resistant to reforming this industry along the supply chain?
I mean, I think there's a number of issues there. Some of them are technically complicated. Like you're talking about a large number of family farms which need to have engagement with them. And that's just a big issue which has to be dealt with. A second issue which was touched upon by one of your previous speakers, Nelson, was that the government needs to engage with this as well. So it's good to see that the government in Ghana is beginning to take this up, but you need to have that joint work between business and government to address these issues. I think the consumer-facing retailers, the consumer-facing businesses are probably the businesses who are most engaged with this so far, because campaigners working on the issue of cocoa over the past 10, 20 years have made it something which consumers care about. So it's therefore something which businesses are beginning to care about as well. But not all businesses are consumer-facing. So it's important that the consumer-facing businesses then get the non-consumer-facing businesses to engage with these issues as well. And that's something I think which you see much more of, say, within the cocoa sector than a lot of other agribusiness sectors. So now there is a coalition of both NGOs and others working with the cocoa sector. The Fur Labour Association, for example, is now working with Nestle, for example. CARE and some of the UN agencies are working with Mondelez. And you see this right across a lot of the as I said, the consumer-facing businesses to try and introduce new practices and approaches which will help to deliver some of these issues of child labour and resolve them. But it's a big and complex problem which needs a lot more money put into it.
You go into the region and I presume you speak with community leaders like Nana. Do you find resistance or do you find people willing to change?
Well, people are generally willing to change. I mean, a lot of the reasons that you're having issues of child labour within farms has been alluded to by both our colleagues from Ghana here, is that cocoa prices are generally quite low. Therefore, families which farm cocoa are therefore quite poor. Therefore, whenever they need labour on cocoa, and if you've ever been in a cocoa farm, you know that this is tough work. They therefore use their children to labour on the cocoa farms rather than go to school, rather than play, rather than enjoy their childhood. And that's when the issue becomes child labour. If they're going to school and playing football after school and having something of a childhood and also helping out a bit on the farm, that's child work. But what we're seeing is because of the poverty, because of the fragmentation of farms, because of the low cocoa prices, therefore there's a lot of poor families, the communities don't have an awful lot more employment options, and therefore there's a lot of child labour.
Yeah.
So this is something which needs a much, much bigger effort on, and it needs an industry-wide collaboration with government in order to address this.
Aidan McQuaid, Nana Aduna and Terry Collingsworth, thank you all very much, and thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Remember, if you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.